Mm-hmm.
This critique focuses on your research document, Quantifying ESG, Bridging the Gap to Financial Returns, which proposes a unified ESG framework, or QESGRS, and uses a cross-sectional analysis of S&P 500 firms. So this paper gets your attention right away. It's tackling a huge problem in finance, this divergence in ESG ratings.
Mm-hmm.
And your solution, the QESGRS, is really brilliant. It aims for standardization, which is exactly what's needed. But then when I got to the empirical part, sections 4.1 to 4.7,
Right.
the analysis shows these really weak, insignificant relationships. The ESG total score correlation was something like negative zero point zero 0.01. It just feels like structurally, the reader has to process this entire complex solution before they even really feel the full weight of the problem.
That's it exactly. That feeling of backtracking. You've got these two powerhouse elements, a great new framework and the data to prove the old way is broken, but they're not in the right order. To maximize the paper's narrative momentum, the empirical results showing weak correlation in existing data should be immediately reframed as the primary evidence of the problem QESGRS is designed to solve. The weakness right now is really about pacing. By putting all that great data analysis after the detailed theoretical proposal, you you soften the urgency for the framework itself.
Yeah, it's like the analysis feels like a validation exercise at the end, not the core reason for the whole paper.
Exactly. You've already given us the cure. Now you're asking us to go back and feel the symptoms. It just dampens the investment in the solution.
So it's a structural fix then.
It is, and a pretty direct one. The idea is to fundamentally shift the purpose of your data. Don't treat it as a standalone results section. Instead, you recast it immediately as a quantitative, really compelling problem statement. You use those insignificant findings as your opening salvo. You're proving the current system isn't just theoretically messy, it has zero short-term information value for investors.
Okay, so let's get concrete. What does that look like in practice?
Well, you mentioned in the portfolio sorting analysis that there's almost no difference in returns between the high and low ESG quartiles.
Right.
That finding is gold. Don't wait until Section 4 to reveal that. Pull it right into Section 3, your problem statement. Use those specific numbers, like the negative zero point zero 0.04 correlation for governance. That becomes your smoking gun. It shows the current system is failing, which makes your QESGRS framework feel like the necessary, urgent remedy. It transforms the whole paper, really, from just an interesting analysis into a vital call to action.
I see. Yeah, that absolutely solves the flow issue, and it gives the reader immediate stakes. It makes them want to understand QESGRS. Okay, so let's pivot from sequencing to the analysis itself, because there was another mismatch I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Your literature review is great. It's really deep. It lays out the theory for why ESG matters long term. Things like lower cost of capital, risk mitigation.
Stability, resilience in a crisis, all that.
Exactly. You're drawing on past or agency theory, all focused on long-term benefits. But then the empirical test is it's a cross-section using price change percentage between two dates. It feels like using a yardstick to measure temperature.
That's a perfect analogy, actually. You set up this really complex theoretical machine that says high ESG should mean lower risk, and because of that, maybe even lower expected returns over time.
Right.
Then you test it for short-term alpha, which, the literature says shouldn't even exist anyway. The empirical validation section must be broadened to align the short-term cross-sectional data with the paper's primary focus on long-term risk mitigation and stability. And the weakness really is that finding that ESG is not a short-term return enhancer, well, that's what the theory would predict. So you're confirming the literature, but you're not proving the value of ESG, which your paper says is all about risk and stability.
So the data isn't really answering the right question?
It's not. You're asking it something it's not designed to answer. And so the conclusion is just, well, ESG doesn't help you get rich quick, which, we kind of already knew. It doesn't do justice to your theoretical setup. So the suggestion here is pretty clear, I think. Even without, say, 10 years of data, the analysis needs to pivot. It needs to show how ESG scores relate to cross-sectional risk or volatility. Those are the things you claim ESG captures.
Okay.
So reframe the whole analysis away from predicting returns and toward explaining stability. ESG isn't a return signal, it's a stability factor. You have to test it that way.
That makes complete sense theoretically. If it's about resilience, you test for resilience. But let me push back a little on the execution.
Sure.
You're suggesting a pivot to volatility, but wouldn't getting the high-frequency data for that, daily returns to calculate variance, wouldn't that shrink the sample size even more? Is that actually doable with the data they have?
That's a critical point, and that's why we have to get creative with proxies. You already have a clue in your own data. You noted that the dispersion of returns within the quartiles was relatively wide.
Okay, yeah.
You can use that, leverage that inherent volatility. You can propose alternative tests, like correlating ESG scores with a proxy for risk. Maybe you can't get daily variance, but maybe you can get implied volatility for those firms.
Ah, okay.
Or even a simple standard deviation of returns over your measurement period compared across the quartiles. Anything that tests for stability would be more meaningful. It would reinforce your core hypothesis that ESG is a stabilizing factor, which is just a much more powerful conclusion.
That is a high-impact change. It reframes the whole validation section. It moves it from maybe a slightly weak test into a really nuanced argument that supports your theory. Okay, let's talk about the heart of the solution itself, the QESGRS. The ambition here is what I really appreciate. You're proposing this independent ESG ranking authority, the ESGRS, to manage everything. It's the whole engine for standardization.
It's undeniable. An ESGRS is exactly what the market needs. But whenever you propose something that is, let's be honest, it's regulatory reform.
Right.
It has to be bulletproof when it comes to feasibility. To ensure the proposal is perceived as fully feasible, the operational and governance mechanisms for the external quantitative ESG ranking system must be significantly expanded. So the core weakness isn't the formula, the weighted average of the normalized scores, that's clear. It's the implementation section. It's a bit then on the really tough operational challenges.
Like what, specifically?
Specifically, you're trying to standardize irrespective of industry, but you're using Z-scores that are standardized relative to the industry mean. That creates a huge dependency on NIAS codes, which your own analysis flagged as often not found.
That's the definition of a single point of failure.
It is. If the classification is missing, the normalization falls apart, and the whole EQS score becomes meaningless, or worse, arbitrary.
So the implementation needs a lot more detail.
Exactly. So my suggestion is to really deepen that discussion. How will the ESGRA handle these data quality issues? How will it handle missing classifications? That's the messy reality that undermines standardization. And you also need to get into the policy side. How are those weights for E, S, and G decided? Is it statistical or is it a policy consensus? That's a huge governance question. So for concrete examples, you need to bolster Phase 1, the metric definition part, and Phase 4, the disclosure integration. You need a real plan. How does the ESGRA enforce reporting on those tough social metrics like workforce diversity across totally different global industries?
Yeah, how do you get a tech company in California and a mining company in South Africa to report the exact same metric?
You have to spell that out. And crucially, you have to address the missing NAICS codes head-on. What's the plan B? Is there a default global normalization, or maybe a fallback to a broader industry group? Clarifying that turns QESGRS from a great idea into a robust operational model.
Okay, so we've covered 3 pretty high-level improvements today, all aimed at maximizing the impact of what is a really important piece of work. First, we suggested that big narrative pivot, use your empirical data right up front to quantify the problem, make the case for QESGRS inescapable.
Right.
Second, we talked about aligning your analysis with your theory. Pivot from testing short-term returns to testing for risk and stability, like volatility. That makes your validation section so much stronger. And finally, we recommended really strengthening the operational guts of the ESGRA, focusing on governance, data quality, and having a plan for those inevitable data gaps, like the missing sector codes.
This is a seriously ambitious document, and it shows real expertise. If you refine these 3 areas, the narrative urgency, the analytical alignment, and the operational feasibility, you're going to push this from an excellent idea to a truly robust implementable framework. And that's something the financial industry really needs. We would strongly encourage you to refine these elements and submit the work back to us for another look.